expectations. So I'm looking forward to amendments to the budget resolution tomorrow. I thank the chair.
Thank you. Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for your focus and hard work in putting together a strong budget. As you know, I'm going to vote for the budget. I would have done it somewhat differently. I believe that when we talk about $4 trillion in deficit reduction, half of that money should have come from revenue and half from cuts. That is not the case. I also, at a time when over 14% of our people are unemployed, true unemployment, I would have put more money into job creation than we did. But all in all, I think you've done a really very good job. Now, let me begin. Well, I really began. I'm beginning the second time. Let me begin a second time. As the major deficit hawk on this committee, say this. It is easy to give speeches about your concern about the deficit. It is a little bit harder to vote that way. I voted against the war in Iraq, which will end up costing us well over $1 trillion. If I'm not mistaken, my good friend, and he is a good friend, Senator Sessions, voted for that war. We didn't pay for that war. That added well over $1 trillion to our deficit. I voted against tax breaks for the wealthiest people in this country. If I'm not mistaken, Senator Sessions and many of my good Republican colleagues voted for these tax breaks without any offset. Every economist tells us that adds to the deficit. If I'm not mistaken, Senator Sessions and many of my Republican colleagues voted for a Medicare Part D prescription drug program that wasn't paid for. I voted against that proposal. Many of my Republican friends voted to deregulate Wall Street, which led, of course, to Wall Street's greed and recklessness and illegal behavior, which brought them to the collapse, to almost the financial collapse, and brought us to the recession today, which has not only caused so much pain and unemployment, obviously it has led to substantially lower revenue. As we all know now, if you add the wars, if you add tax breaks, if you add Medicare Part D, and you add the recession, we are at somewhere around 15.8% revenue as part of GDP, the lowest in 60 years. So my Republican friends, oh, the problem is just spending, spending, spending. Not really. When you're at the lowest percentage of revenue in 60 years, you got to look at the revenue issue as well. At the end of 2000, when Clinton left office, we had a $236 billion surplus. Today we have an $850 billion deficit, and the reason for that transition is largely the wars, the tax breaks, the recession, Medicare Part D. So I think that before we go about cutting Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, education, nutrition, we better think twice about how we got to where we are today. Second point, if we're looking at moral values, and I think Senator Sessions used the word moral values, let's take a look at where we are in the economy today. Today in America, we have the most unequal distribution of wealth and income of any major country on earth, and it is worse than at any time in our country since just before the Great Depression. The average middle-class family has seen its income go down by nearly $5,000 after adjusting for inflation since 1999. We're seeing a collapsing middle class. Real unemployment, as I mentioned, is not 7.7%. It is really over 14%. Youth unemployment, a whole future generation, is today close to 25%. These are kids who are not getting their feet on the ground, not developing a career. God only knows what happens to them as they proceed in life. Unemployment for people of color is even much higher than the general population. In terms of job creation, it's not good enough to talk about our need for jobs. We surely do. Do you know that nearly two-thirds of the jobs being created today are low-wage jobs that families can't live upon? Got to deal with that issue as well. So while the middle class is collapsing, while poverty is at over 46 million, there's another phenomenon that's taking place, and we have to deal with that, my friends. I know my Republican friends and some of my Democratic friends don't want to look at it, but this is what you got to look at. Top 1% today owns 38% of the wealth in America. Do you know what the bottom 60% own? Anyone know? 2.3%. Now, who do you think should pick up the burden of deficit reduction? Do you want to go to the bottom 60%? You want to go to the working class family in Alabama that's making $20,000 a year, hasn't a clue about how they're going to send their kids to college? I don't think that's the way you do. In terms of income, top 1% earns more income than the bottom 50%. You got one family, the Walton family, that owns more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people. Now, here's a fact also that's extraordinary when you talk about who you go after in order to deal with the deficit. This is unbelievable. Between 2009 and 2011, all new income created in America went to the top 1%. That's it. 99% actually saw a reduction in their income. Every dollar of new income went to the people on top. So the question that we have to address ourselves, what is fair? What's right? Do you really want to go after an elderly person on Social Security in Vermont living on $15,000 a year? Or do you think maybe at a time we have such huge inequality in America, maybe we ask the wealthiest people, maybe we ask the largest corporations in this country to start paying their fair share of taxes? And let me say a few things about corporate taxes.
And Senator, if you could...
Wind it up. Okay. Well, this is what I want to say. Where do we get the revenue? I think this is Senator Sessions. Others have asked it. In 2010, Bank of America set up more than 200 subsidiaries in the Cayman Islands to avoid paying U.S. taxes. It worked. Bank of America did not pay anything in federal income taxes in that year, and it got a rebate from the IRS for $1.9 billion, and on it goes. Wall Street, energy companies, large corporations. So you want to know where you get the money? And help us to do deficit reduction, not by cutting Social Security or Medicare, by asking Citigroup and Bank of America and these other large corporations, 1 out of 4 profitable corporations not paying a nickel in taxes, ask them to start paying their fair share. We could deal with deficit reduction in a way that's fair. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I want to join those who